I call the member for Melbourne and the Deputy Leader of the Greens.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Parliament should be a place where the rule of law and civil liberties are defended. Now, there are a number of things that make up those core principles, but two of them are very important and are under significant threat from this bill. First is the basic principle that people are entitled to the treatment of equality, equal treatment before the law, and the basic principle of equality. And that says it doesn't matter that you happen to be a person of a certain colour, a person of a certain occupation, a person of a certain residence. Your rights before the law to be treated as a citizen equal to other citizens will be guaranteed, because that is a cornerstone of a democracy. And another fundamental principle is that, as an individual, you have rights to liberty and rights to privacy, and that those cannot be taken away by the government or by the state in the absence of some compelling urgency. And so, most importantly, our criminal law is founded on the basis that it is up to the prosecution to prove that you've done something wrong, and you can't be compelled to say something that might incriminate you. And there are very, very limited exceptions where that rule does not apply. And it is often said, with some justification, that those principles of equality before the law and the fact that you can't be treated in an arbitrary manner by government just because of the circumstance of where you happen to be born or where you happen to work or who you happen to be, and the fact that you can't be forced to give up your right to silence, it is often said that those things define a democracy, and that once you remove those, you start slipping from a democracy into something else. So that is a boundary that we need to not only carefully police, but that the Parliament should be the prime defender of. And the thing about defending the principles of the rule of law and the right to silence, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that you can't just defend them when they're being exercised by people you like. If you believe in the right to silence, and if you believe in equality, it needs to apply to everyone, not just those who happen to be on your side of the fence at a particular point in time. And this is a government that's fond of making that case, especially when it comes to questions of freedom of speech, saying that that should be an untrammelled right and that Parliament's role is to expand the right of people to say whatever they like. And you would expect also that not only is Parliament the place where that is going to be defended, but that a party that has the word Liberal in their name would be one of the first people to stand up in defence of an individual's right before the rule of law to be treated equally and to have their liberty preserved. But that's not what we're getting with this bill. What we're getting with this bill, as other speakers have said, is a situation where in Australia, just because of the industry you happen to work in, you can be hauled before a Star Chamber for a secret inquisition. You don't have the right to silence, and when you get out, you can't even go and tell your wife or your husband or your family at home about it, because that would be breaking the law. And as the previous member said, it doesn't just apply to people who work in that industry, it applies to someone who happens to be walking past at a particular time who might accidentally, allegedly witness something. They can be hauled in and subject to those same rules as well. This isn't liberalism. That's because what we've got from the people who sit on the government benches is reaction masquerading as liberalism, extremism masquerading as liberalism. And it's why in all of the speeches so far you haven't heard them say one thing about an individual's right to silence or the right to equality before the law. What this absolutely is a targeting of particular people in particular industries on a particular side of the fence. Now, we've heard it said that there are problems in this industry. Well, I'll tell you what, there are problems in this industry, Mr Deputy Speaker. There are problems with sham contracting this government says nothing about. But even more recently, you open up the newspaper to find that one of the biggest construction companies in this country is alleged to have tried to bribe Saddam Hussein's regime. Now, when that happens in the construction industry, what do? Nothing. Nothing. There is no request to investigate what ASIC and AFP have been doing or why this has been allowed to continue. Where's the Royal Commission into that? No, instead we have a particular targeting of a particular group of people because they happen to sit from the government side on the wrong side of the fence. And the previous member talked a lot about the Coal Royal Commission and said that that was a judicial inquiry. Well, that was a judicial inquiry in the same way that Stalinist show trials were a judicial inquiry. Having observed that at very close quarters, it was incredible the number of times the prosecutor would get up and say, we're talking about people locked in shipping containers, and by the end of that particular case study, no evidence was led about anyone being allegedly locked in shipping containers, but the headlines were there and the damage was done. But whatever you think about that Royal Commission, after all those millions were spent on that Royal Commission that is supposedly the basis for this bill, can I ask you, Mr Deputy Speaker, do you know how many prosecutions came out of that Royal Commission? 0. 0 prosecutions came out of that Royal Commission, despite all of this alleged illegality in the industry that this Royal Commission uncovered. Not one prosecution came out of it. And we hear talk about alleged crime and thuggery in this industry. Well, I want to remind the members on sitting on the government benches that this legislation does not give the new body power to deal with criminal matters. That is what the police are for and will continue to be for. So all this rhetoric about the talk of burning necklaces and so on, that is just completely out of order because it has nothing to do with this bill, because this bill is not about criminal matters. And it is a hallmark of this government that they will dress it up and use inflammatory rhetoric to do something the bill has nothing to do with. What it is about is targeting a particular group of people, and one aspect of it is to try and litigate them, those workers and their unions, to death, and to tie them up in red tape, while their other mates are allowed to go off and do whatever they like. Now, and you can see that shining through in the particular section that says, even if the employer and the workers have resolved whatever the dispute was, it doesn't matter. This new body has the power to come in and continue the litigation. What other areas of industrial disputation does that apply to, where we don't encourage people to resolve things at a workplace level, but instead say the government is allowed to come in and continue litigating one side to death if they want to? And in the same way that we didn't hear any commentary about the right to silence or an individual's liberty, what this also shows is the rank hypocrisy on the government benches when it comes to the free market, because what they're saying is we're quite happy for people to go and negotiate amongst themselves as long as it turns out in our favour. Because once you get a situation where people who work in the construction industry or now perhaps go and do dangerous and demanding work offshore, if they're able to negotiate themselves better wages and conditions, no, we can't have that. The free market wasn't meant to operate in that way. We need a massively resourced government body to come in over the top and tell people how to live their lives upon threat of going to jail. Now, this is not a government of Liberals, this is a government of corporate shills who are willing to stand up and say whatever their mates on one side of the fence want them to do, but when it comes to tackling sham contracting, when it comes to addressing the substantial underpayments of people on building sites right across this country, this government is completely silent. And so, Mr Deputy Speaker, I won't take up the previous member's suggestions to join the coalition in this assault on the rule of law. This is something that quite rightly deserves the condemnation, not only of people who work in the industry and who know what this will mean for them on a day-to-day basis, but it has quite rightly drawn the condemnation of civil libertarians and anyone who believes in the principle of the rule of law, and I am very proud, as Deputy Speaker, to stand with them in opposing this bill.